This week on LTC News, history through music at the MRT.
With the Vietnam War, the American Army brings in the Armed Forces Network, and so all of a sudden now they can get on the radio Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan and Creedence Clearwater, and it blows their minds.
Basketball season ramps up at UMass.
Last year we had our best year ever in Division I with our most wins, and we all feel like we have a better team this year than we had last year.
And the health of the Merrimack.
Bringing together communities and leaders from those communities from up and down the Merrimack River Valley to talk about water supply, water quality, and how to deal with climate change issues like flooding.
All this and much more on this edition of LTC News. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your host, Krista Brown. Cambodian Rock Band, a musical theater production by renowned playwright Lauren Yee, is currently playing at the Merrimack Repertory Theatre. The production tells the tragic story of the Khmer Rouge period and the generational trauma that persists, which is the real-life experience of many Lowell residents. The cast members gathered on the MRT stage to discuss the production and its relevance today.
Lauren Yee, who is a playwright who lives in New York, who did undergrad in San Diego and went to Yale, who's a young Asian American playwright, was commissioned to write a play. She's not Khmer, she's Chinese American. She did research and drove around Southern California and actually had visited Cambodia in an earlier period of her life, and she remembered being struck by the music there. And so that stuck in her mind, and so she went down the rabbit hole, as she said, and among other things, she discovered the music of Dengue Fever, who wrote most of the music for the show. Most of the music was taken from their catalog and then used in the show. But there's also traditional Khmer music from the period of the 70s. With the Vietnam War, the American Army brings in the Armed Forces Network, and so all of a sudden now they can get on the radio Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan and Creedence Clearwater, and it blows their minds. And all of a sudden they start learning all of these American rock songs, and then they start translating them into Khmer, and then they start writing their own music, and all of that is happening, and they're having house parties and they're playing at clubs, and then all of that comes to an abrupt end in 1975.
The history of Cambodia isn't broadly known in the States or anywhere really. Everyone thinks of Cambodia as a very sad post-genocide place, and this play is bringing to light all of the vibrant artistic, musical aspects of the community that was taken out with the killing fields. And everyone should see it because it's an important part of history, and because the music is so beautiful, and because Lauren's an incredible playwright in the play. It's not only about the genocide, it's not only about the music, it's about family and overcoming obstacles, and it's about surviving. And so it's relatable to everyone because everyone's part of a family.
This play starts in 2008, and there were war crimes tribunals that were held in Cambodia. And there were a number of Khmer, Cambodian Americans who worked with survivors and refugees to get their stories, to organize them, and to bring them to the tribunal to testify against a number of the higher-up officials within the Khmer Rouge. So this is a story that starts there. And then it starts with a daughter whose father was a survivor. And she's working on getting a conviction of a man named Doik, who ran a place called Tuol Sleng, S-21 prison, which is a famous place where people were basically tortured and killed. And it was now a museum in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, the capital. And then it proceeds to tell the story of what happened to her father back in 1975 through 78. And so it's a story of a father and a daughter, but it's a story of a people. And it's a story of genocide, but it's also a story of survival.
There are things that happen in the play that eerily echo what's going on in our country right now, whether it be the treatment of refugees or human rights issues or military forces pulling out of places that need support.
We run Wednesday through Sunday through November 10th, and we have 2 shows on Saturday and Sunday, so you've got lots of opportunities to see it.
For more information, visit the MRT website. More than 10 million Americans each year are victims of domestic violence. To advocate for the victims and help them through their traumatic experience, the Lowell Police Department has Kristen Williams in the Family Services Unit of LPD. We spoke with Kristen about her work after attending a candlelight vigil for victims on October 21st.
I want to first thank each and every one of you for joining us here tonight at City Hall as we recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that we remember those who have lost their lives due to domestic violence. And further, that we recommit ourselves to doing all that we can to eliminate this devastating form of violence in our community.
So Family Services, we cover any child abuse cases, domestic violence cases, anything with elder abuse. My primary role is to look into the reports, any domestic violence cases, reach out to the listed victim, offer them any services, or see if they have any questions or how we can, further help them. So my position is more of kind of being the middle person between the police department and the officers and the victims, kind of a liaison between them, seeing, what the detectives need from a victim for follow-up and also what the victims need from the police department, and trying to get everybody in contact and make sure that victims get whatever services they need, whether it be a restraining order, safe housing, any connections that we can make for them. We don't care about your immigration status or anything like that. We just want to make sure that everyone in the community is safe.
As we look at the numbers and see that there have been 21 domestic violence-related homicides in Massachusetts so far this year alone, it is clear that the kind of violence is far too often rattling the security that people should have in their own homes. And so awareness is a major part of the equation, and stepping up in the way that you all are doing here tonight is perhaps the best way that we can honor those who have lost their lives to this heartbreaking crime.
June 1st, 2019, Cluseline L. Da Silva, 41 of Worcester, was stabbed to death by her former male partner in her home. Worcester police responded to a call that evening reporting a stabbing. Officers found L. Da Silva suffering from stab wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene. L. Da Silva, who moved to the United States from Brazil 14 years ago, was identified by her son, Lucas Silva.
Something I would say to anyone who's in a scary situation or a violent situation is that they're not alone, and that there's a lot of agencies here in Lowell and around Lowell that are all working together to try to make sure that everyone feels safe and that they get whatever resources they need. And I'd hope that people, if they have suspicions of someone that they love or that they know, and they think they might be in a bad situation, to reach out to them and just look out for each other as best as we can, and that we're here if they have questions or if they're not sure, if they really want to go forward with charges. We also have close connections with different agencies within Lowell. Whatever anyone needs, if they feel like they need something, just to reach out, that we're here. We can, if it's not something that I can handle or I can help them with, I have other partners that I can reach out to and make sure, we can all make sure that everyone gets whatever they need.
The Merrimack Valley Smart Growth Summit took place October 29th at UTEC. The summit focused on threats to the Merrimack River watershed from climate change. Issues discussed included land use, water conservation, green infrastructure, and more.
We're bringing together communities and leaders from those communities from up and down the Merrimack River Valley to talk about water supply, water quality, and how to deal with climate change issues like flooding. A lot of times people feel that climate change doesn't affect them or doesn't affect them yet, or if they don't live on the coast, it's not something they have to worry about. But in fact, we've already seen weather patterns change quite a bit, and we're getting probably double the amount of severe storm incidents that we've ever had in the past, and that's only going to continue. So flooding is going to become an increasing issue for the Merrimack watershed.
Traditionally, we would go to planners, we would go to engineers, we would talk to all of those folks. Well, let's start talking to the folks that are doing the work on the environmental side, and how are we having the conversations together to be able to come up with non-traditional solutions to those problems that affect folks in Plum Island, but really start up at the headways, right, and come down and are affecting the different communities in different ways. So let's think non-traditionally, and I think, this conference is that starting to think about those non-traditional solutions and how we work together across communities without boundaries to really come together to solve some of these problems.
A lot of it is how we grow, right? And that's the solution. So right now we have a lot of impervious surface, which means the water runs right off very quickly when there's a severe incident, and the land can't absorb that water as much. So we need to have projects of what's called green infrastructure. We need to have more tree plantings and water plantings. We need to break up, the asphalt so that there's more opportunities for the water to filter. And then we also need to be smart about how we channel the water, right? So when there is a severe incident, where does it go to? There's many communities, especially low-income neighborhoods, are in the most vulnerable areas, and we need to really figure out how we're going to help them when these incidents occur. And in the future, we may have to think about building in different places. There are things that we can do. So oftentimes, what you're seeing in places like Boston and elsewhere is that near the coast, they're not putting, they're making the first floor floodable, right? And putting the utilities, instead of in the basement, putting them on the roof now. So there are those kinds of simple things that can be done when we're thinking about the design of new buildings or retrofitting old buildings. Lowell is a wonderful place. It's a city of canals, right? And one of the things that makes it so unique is that it has this wonderful architecture, historic architecture, and that's going to be, I think, a big benefit as we go into this new future, because we will need to manage our water, but Lowell's been doing that now for 150 years, and we can keep doing it. Well, the great thing is that people are endlessly creative, right? And so you're seeing there's wonderful new ideas and innovations that are happening all over the world, and part of what we're trying to do today is bring some of those ideas here to the Merrimack Valley. And there are communities that are doing great work here as well, and we need to share those ideas with each other.
This summit was presented by the Massachusetts Smart Growth Alliance, the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, and the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. You can watch the full program on LTC Channel 8. Riverhawk basketball is ready to tip off the 2019-2020 season at the Tsongas Center. The programs are led by two coaches in their sophomore seasons with the Riverhawks, Pat Duquette for the men's and Tom Garrick for the women's.
Yeah, I think everybody's excited around the program, within the program. Last year we had our best year ever in Division I with our most wins, and we all feel like we have a better team this year than we had last year. We've got a nice balance of some experienced upperclassmen that played big roles for us last year, and what we think is one of our most talented freshman incoming classes. So we're working right now on blending those two groups together, but overall we feel like it's the most talented group we've had since we've been here. Well, we've got more home games this year than we've ever had in the past, so it's a great opportunity for the locals and the students to come out and support us. We've had great fan support, especially the last couple of years. We've seen an increase in our attendance. We're playing almost all of our games over at the Tsongas Center, which I know as a fan, it's just a much easier place to get to. It's a really nice venue to watch a basketball game, and our guys get really excited to play there. I mean, it's a top-notch, high-major Division I college basketball venue, so we're looking forward to playing almost all of our games there and having more home games this year than we've ever had in the past.
We got a lot of returning guys who are ready to make bigger impacts than we did last year, and we got a lot of newcomers who are eager to learn and hungry to win, so that's kind of the culture right now. What excites me about playing at the Tsongas Center is the fans. Being in an arena like that and having fans cheering for you, I mean, it makes me and makes probably the team feel bigger than what we actually are probably, like it's an experience that will go a long way after we graduate. So having them there just helps a lot.
First of all, let's just talk about the Tsongas Arena being one of the top arenas on the East Coast, bar none in college athletics. So you get the luxury of feeling like you're in a big-time arena with a small-time feel at the same time because you're right on top of the action. And what you're going to see when you come and watch UMass Lowell women's basketball is energy and passion. We're going to be disciplined, we're going to be hard to play against, and we're going to defend really well. So those are the bases of what our program is going to be built on. Defensive intensity and high-octane offense.
It's just a lot of fun. The whole environment's good. The crowd brings a lot of energy, and it just makes us want to play harder and just play for our crowd. So it's really important that we have a lot of people there. We also have the breast cancer awareness games, senior night, Spread Respect, which is held by our SAC, and Better Together, which is held by our SAC. We also have a day where we have a whole bunch of little kids from different surrounding schools come, and it's their field trip day, and that's probably one of the most energetic, fun, loud, just fun game to just be at because all the little kids are just so excited to be there and not in school.
I think we have a good mix of old to young this year. We have a few seniors who are layovers from our first team last year, and we have an influx of new and exciting talent. So I think the Riverhawk fans have a lot to look forward to. We're going to have some growing pains, but I think we've taken leaps and bounds from last year, our first year, and we're ready to make some noise in the America East, hopefully.
For the season schedule and more information, visit their website. In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with the former U.S. representative and current UMass president, Marty Meehan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Scott, the Enterprise Editor at The Sun. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Sunspot. With me is an old friend and a well-known political commodity here in Lowell. He was on the show a couple of weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago, Marty Meehan. Thank you for coming in, Marty. Appreciate it.
Nice to be back.
We're not going to talk UMass. We're not going to talk local politics. We're not going to talk Laurie Trahan. We're going to talk impeachment, because you were a member of Congress back in 1998 when Congress voted rather narrowly, right, to impeach Bill Clinton.
It was pretty much, the vote in the House was pretty much along party lines. However, there were 5 Republicans that voted.
228 to 206? Does that sound right?
Yes.
All right.
And there were 5 Republicans who voted with Democrats not to impeach.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a member at that time of the House Judiciary Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, what that case was about President Clinton having an inappropriate relationship
Mm-hmm.
with Monica Lewinsky,
Mm-hmm.
testifying at a civil deposition under oath that he did not have a sexual relationship with her, and the rest
in the
is
Oval
history.
Office.
That's right, and the rest is history.
So you voted against impeachment.
Yeah, I voted.
You broke from the majority then. So my question: why did you vote against then? And if you were a member of Congress now, would you vote to impeach Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, number one, on the Clinton impeachment, the constitutional issue is having an inappropriate relationship
Mm-hmm.
with an intern in the White House, an impeachable offense. Constitutionally, is it a high crime?
In misdemeanor.
In misdemeanor.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I felt at the time, while inappropriate, while it may be a situation where someone would get fired for that kind of an offense in business or industry or in government for that matter, that constitutionally it wasn't an impeachable offense. And there was a trial in the United States Senate, and President Clinton was acquitted
Mm-hmm.
at that trial.
Mm-hmm. You were never one to shy away from being active in Congress and passing some significant bills. Did you suggest that at the time? I don't recall. Did you suggest a censure?
I did with Republicans
Mm-hmm.
that I was meeting with. I
Mm-hmm.
said, I don't understand why you don't come up with something short of. And Newt Gingrich,
the speaker at the time, right?
Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, and he had a strategy that said, no, we're going to impeach. I think the strategy was flawed. And remember, you have a president having an inappropriate relationship with an intern. You have the second term of a president, midterm elections. Democrats should have lost a ton of seats. Historically, the party in the White House always in a second term, midterm election loses seats. Democrats picked up seats as a result of the impeachment. So I think the more the American public knew about it, the more they said, let's move on with this stuff.
So as horrible as his conduct was in the White House, you just felt that it didn't rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And by the way, what's an important factor in this, neither did the American public. I think the polling and what the American public thinks in an impeachment is always, particularly now, in this day and age where we know in polling, is critically important. At the same time in the impeachment process, back in the early 70s, Richard Nixon, the American public did not want to impeach Richard Nixon. It wasn't until the hearings and the evidence was laid out and Americans were watching the House Judiciary Committee and Sam Ervin in those hearings, and the public totally turned around.
So we're filming this on a day where there's a historic vote in the Capitol, where the House is going to vote today on October 31st to begin formal impeachment proceedings against President Trump. And conceivably that's going to open up the process so the public will then get to see those hearings. And quite possibly what happened to Nixon would happen to Trump. But if you were in the House today, how do you think you would view what Trump has allegedly done to get to this point, as opposed to Clinton?
Well, if in fact, well, I don't think there's any comparison.
Tell us why.
If in fact,
I mean, Trump says everything's made up. It's a hoax. It's a witch hunt.
Yeah, but the evidence seems to suggest that he was on the phone with a foreign leader. It seems to be people who can collaborate this.
But it seems we've gotten to a point where evidence doesn't matter.
Well, it does under the law, though. It does under the law. It does under the Constitution. And ultimately, I would vote to have this inquiry because it seems pretty clear that something went on with the president of Ukraine and where he urged them to investigate one of his political rivals. We can't have presidents doing that.
But think about it for a second, right? When I was driving into work today, I was listening to Republican members of Congress say just the opposite, despite the evidence that seems to indicate that there was a quid pro quo with the president. They're just simply not buying it. They're saying it's just not true. And some of his spokesmen are coming out, what's his chief of staff's name? Mulvaney. He said, well, this face up to the facts, guys, this happens all the time.
Right.
So, you know.
Well, it doesn't happen all the time. There is no way Ronald Reagan would do that. There's no way that Herbert Walker Bush would do that. There's no way that Obama would do that. There's no way that Clinton would do that. There's no way that Ronald Reagan, let's go through history. I've never heard of an American president. I mean, that was the one area where the United States, whether you're Democrat or Republican, would join together whenever there was an issue of dealing with a foreign country or dealing with a foreign leader. So I can't imagine any time in history where this has happened and come to light. You have a president that does whatever he wants to do and then just makes up whatever his facts are. Look, at the end of the day, I think the American public will determine this. The problem that Republicans have, and I think of Lindsey Graham.
Okay, let me just interrupt just for 1 second. So if you were a member of Congress and you were if you were in the House today, you would vote to begin the proceeding.
I would.
There's no question. Okay. And let's take a step further. Do you think that what has allegedly occurred here and what the evidence shows is an impeachable offense? Do you think that at the end of the day, to use that cliche, that there will be that vote?
If, in fact, the facts determine that the president asked a foreign leader to investigate a political opponent and put millions of dollars in financial aid to that country, if you do this, then I think that is an impeachable offense. Now, let me just tell you what my practical skills would be here and what I would attempt to do. I think by the time this would get to the Senate for a trial, we're going to be into 2020. There's going to be an election that's going to be held. The idea of having a trial and impeachment during an election year seems to me to be something that, if I were a Democrat, I wouldn't want to give Trump the victory of that. I don't see why Democrats and Republicans can't find a way to come together and
the C word again?
Condemn his behavior. Look, I think whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you have to make sure that future presidents don't ever try to do this. If this is acceptable behavior for American presidents, that we're going to allow the American presidency to be corrupted by political, trying to hurt a political opponent with a foreign leader, that's unacceptable. Most Republicans privately would tell you
So it sounds like what you're saying there is, and not to put words in your mouth, but rather than do an impeachment hearing in the Senate in an election year.
Well, it would be an impeachment trial. I think there needs to be a hearing in the House Judiciary Committee. and the American public needs to kind of hone in on the facts and find out what the facts are. Everyone testifies under oath. We have a legal system that, frankly, is not a bad system in that people will be under oath. We ought to be able to get to the facts and the truth. We certainly got to the facts and the truth in the impeachment process with President Clinton. It's just that the American public didn't buy into the notion of impeaching. With Richard Nixon in the 70s, we got to the facts. In fact, Richard Nixon had everything on tape. So the facts were not disputable.
But in this case, so your preferred method would be to condemn or to censure, and then let the American public decide in November.
Yeah,
right.
What I think is, number one, there should be hearings, and we should find out exactly what happened. And the House Judiciary Committee and the other committees in Congress should conduct those hearings and conduct the inquiry. All I'm saying is, if this goes into an election year, it seems to me it would be better for the country to determine what the president did, to condemn his actions so future presidents don't do it, and have an election. I mean, the idea of giving Trump an acquittal in the United States Senate,
which is almost a certainty, unless something significant happens.
We're at a point in time where Republicans, I served with Lindsey Graham, and I have to tell you, he doesn't sound like the same Lindsey Graham that I served with, who was very much bipartisan, John McCain-like, in terms of his independence. I think of leaders like John McCain and what he would be saying right now. Somebody who understood foreign policy, somebody who had traveled all over the world in his committee as senior member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. John McCain would be discussing.
Let's just touch base on that for a second, because we mentioned earlier about Republican members of Congress, both the House and Senate, just simply not buying into any of this evidence and just giving no due to any of this evidence. How do you explain that?
You're running for re-election.
It's that simple, right?
Trump has co-opted the Republican Party in this country. We saw it in the Republican campaign for president. You had people like Governor Bush in Florida. You had some really solid Republican candidates.
Who predicted the chaos presidency.
And they did. And he co-opted the Republican Party. His numbers are still very strong among one group of voters, Republican primary voters. So I think those members of the Senate or House who are running for re-election are petrified of opposing Trump. Now those, Senator Flake from Arizona, who decided he wasn't going to run again, very independent. Mitt Romney, who has a 6-year term, is a newly elected senator from the state of Idaho and won't face re-election. He's been pretty independent. I think if you look at what...
But he's hardly come out, throwing any flame. He's being very careful.
He at least has said if the behavior is true, it's appalling, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen.
But say, for instance, the hearings happen. Do you see any of those members of Congress, who, unfortunately we have to wrap it up, coming around on that and saying, wait a minute, this evidence is just too great to overlook, and who cares what the polls
I think the Republican voters who pay attention to it, it depends on how they react to it and how the American people react to it. I will say this, I was talking to a Republican member of the Senate recently, and he said to me, Marty, I wonder whether or not Richard Nixon would have been impeached if Fox News existed in the 70s, which is kind of interesting because if you watch Fox News, they get people all worked up, so there's a base there to keep people happy. So I don't know how it's going to play out. Media is different today. People, it's very different. I only think that Republicans will turn on Trump if Republican voters turn on Trump.
Gotcha. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Chris.
I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Sunspot. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another guest. I'm trying to land Dave Heller, the owner of the Lowell Spinners. As you know, the Lowell Spinners, the future there is a little bit uncertain, and we'll try to talk to him about that. Have a good night, everyone.
And that's all for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8, 95, and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku in the LTC News playlist, on Facebook at LTC Lowell, or on our YouTube page. We leave you now with more scenes from the Riverhawks practice. I'm your host, Krista Brown. Thanks for joining us.